Hi, I'm Dr Lindsey Cameron at the University of Kent, and in this presentation we'll consider the role of peers in children's gender development. Now, one of the most critical questions in developmental psychology is to identify where children learn gender stereotypes from, as this is a potential means of disrupting the stereotype as well. We've done research on all of these, but in this presentation I'm going to focus on the role of peers. Now, children are strong enforcers of gender-typed play, and they can be observed as the gatekeepers and policing gender norms. They reward gender normative behaviour, the behaviour that follows the gender stereotypes, and they punish those children who break the stereotype through rejection or name-calling or telling them not to do what they're doing. Now, we know from research that peer models can actually influence children's gender-typed play. We know that children prefer objects and activities that are endorsed by models of the same gender and age as them. And we know that gender flexibility can be increased through exposure to counter-stereotypic models of gender-related behaviour. So when children observe peers behaving in a way that is counter to the traditional gender stereotypes, this can boost their gender flexibility. And conversely, they prefer objects and activities that are endorsed by models. So that is, when they see peers playing with stereotypical objects and in stereotypical games, this makes them want to do it as well. Now, from a very early age, children are policing gender stereotypes. From 3 years of age, we begin to hear children say these kind of things. They praise children who follow the stereotype, they imitate their peers who do, and also criticise other children who don't follow the stereotypes as well. They're very rigid, they can be very rigid. Now, one key finding in developmental psychology is that gender stereotypes are actually a bit more relaxed for girls compared with boys. And this has been shown in numerous studies, but here's one example. In this classic study by Blakemore, children were presented with examples of children in stereotype consistent versus inconsistent scenarios. And they were then asked to evaluate the protagonists, so how positively or negatively they viewed them. And what they found was that when children viewed these different protagonists who were either engaging in stereotype consistent or inconsistent behaviours, girls were generally more positive about gender norm violations. So when the norm was violated, girls were a bit more positive, whereas boys who violated gender norms were viewed more negatively than girls who violated gender norms. So when boys, the male protagonists, were behaving in a way that wasn't consistent with the stereotype, they were viewed much more negatively than girls who broke with the stereotype. So you can see here that the stereotype is being applied much more rigidly and harshly to boys compared to girls. And girls are a bit more relaxed about breaking stereotypes in general. And this has been found in a number of studies. Another way we investigate the role of peers in developmental psychology is to try and manipulate accountability. That is, manipulate whether peers are present or absent to see if children change their gender stereotypical behaviour or choices. In this classic study by Banerjee and Lintern, they looked at whether children change their gender type behaviour if they think that they have peers, a peer audience. And what they found was that younger boys, about 4 years of age, were more likely to present themselves as sex-typed when in front of an audience versus alone. And these are also children with the most rigid stereotypes and the least flexibility. But what is interesting is they also found that older children were unaffected by the audience. And maybe that's because they've already learnt to monitor their behaviour to conform to stereotypes, regardless of whether they have an audience or not.